The title of this podcast is Letting Go of Attachments. This particular episode is inspired by a quote that my good friend Brian Chung sent me from Eckhart Tolle. And it says, "How do you let go of attachments to things? Don't even try. It's impossible. Attachment to things drops away by itself when you no longer seek to find yourself in them." This really, really resonates with me. And one of the primary reasons is that when I think of some of the suffering that I've experienced, almost all of it being self-inflicted. I was unconscious that it was self-inflicted, but it was self-inflicted nonetheless. Is attachment was often an element of it, of the suffering, or contributed to it. And it showed up in many forms. Many years ago, when I went to a significant, I mean, it's relative to the absolute sense of things, but a significant financial challenge. And I had to sell my house or lose it. And I was also trying to figure out how I was going to be able to afford my car, luxury car. And up until that point, if you told me that I was attached to material things, I would have said, no way, I'm not. And when that event happened, I remember having shame over it, that if people found out that I was experiencing this kind of financial distress. And so I would do all kinds of things to hide it. One of the things that I would do is I would park a long way from the gym entrance. And the replacement car that I got was a used car. So I had shame over that. And this is how the attachment showed up. I had attachment to how people viewed me or saw me. With my house, I waited almost to the 11th hour to finally be vulnerable and tell a friend who was a realtor to help me in this situation. And I received less for the house than I would have if I'd been open and vulnerable earlier, but more importantly, not attached to that material thing. Now, it doesn't have to all be material. Attachment can also show up in the form of a personal concept about yourself, your title. So if you're a person who finds themselves or seeks themselves in their academic achievements or their professional pursuits, titles, and then something happens to where you're no longer in that title, either through you have gone through the process of reaching the maturation of that particular title, for example, a term limit, and you go back to serving or performing like other people in that same department or division or work unit, but you're attached to the leadership aspect of it or having some level of power that you might not have had before. And so going back to it can be a challenge to a lot of people, also resulting in quite a bit of suffering. And what's at the heart of it, or core of it, is attachment. It can also be with the roles we play: a parent, a significant other. You go through a divorce, your children move on, there is death or loss, and you sought to define yourself by a particular role. And attachment can also lead to suffering in those areas. But when you start to do the work of working on yourself inside, so that the things external to you that you have no control over no longer cause you suffering and you don't find yourself in them, then you can sit back and you can observe all these things without finding yourself in them, your self-concept. And when you do that, it's freeing. You're able to be turned on and experience life in a way that attachment doesn't allow you to, because it's the fear of losing something. And another area that I didn't mention was outcome, attachment to how things need to go or meet your expectations or your preferences. That causes a great deal of suffering for a lot of people. An idea that you present or pitch, and it takes a longer time to develop because you have attachment to a certain timeline or other people supporting it and improving it. That can also be a form of suffering that is a result of attachment. And the wise person sits back when that attachment thing shows up with the suffering. They observe it. I mean, they allow it to touch their heart, touch their mind, but they don't get involved with it because they are with every time it shows up and it causes this ping, this little pain, it's a signal to wake up, to be aware, to be conscious that that thing that you're attached to, that person that you're attached to is not you, but you allow yourself to experience it without being involved with it. And then you lean back and it will pass. And when it passes, you'll be reminded in the terms of a career pursuit or a title that at your core, you're just a servant. You'll also be aware in the terms of playing a role as a parent or a significant other or a family member, that you're just playing a role in that moment, but that doesn't define who you are. Because before you had children, you were still you. You know, before you got married, you were still you. And if those things change where the children move on, you go through a divorce, hopefully you're still you, unless you're attached to those roles. And then the suffering begins, and it doesn't create space for you to see the possibilities in this new direction that your life might be headed toward, to really celebrate all of the goodness and joy that you experienced when you were playing those roles, or those people were in your life in the way that they were. So I encourage you to listen to Eckhart Tolle as he shares about the key or the way to being free of attachment. You don't have to try to do anything at all. Nothing. All you have to be is aware of not defining or seeking yourself in attachment. And when you do, all of that falls away, and it creates this amazing opening to really be present to life, where there's so much goodness. And so attachment is something that I've done a really good job, thanks to the practice of working on. And it's something that I continue to work on because it shows up. This work is never done. Wax on, wax off. Chop wood, carry water. Love the journey.